Their retired police dog had never growled at anyone until the new babysitter walked through the door. At first, they thought he was just being overprotective, until the security cam footage revealed something far more sinister. Here's what happened. But before we get into the story, drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday. The house smelled of fresh paint, toddler toys lay scattered on the living room carpet, and sunlight poured through the windows in golden slants, catching dust particles mid-air like glitter. Marley, their aging golden retriever and once celebrated canine officer, lay curled by the fireplace, his muzzle graying, his movements slower now, but his eyes, those sharp, amber eyes, still missed nothing. Claire had just finished wiping sticky yogurt from the high chair when the doorbell rang. She tossed the towel onto the counter, scooped up little Ellie, and made her way to the door. "Be nice, Marley." She chuckled, already sensing the stiffening of his posture before she even reached the handle. She opened the door to a smiling young woman with sun-streaked brown hair, an oversized tote bag slung across her shoulder, and a warm, practiced voice. "Hi, I'm Kayla. So nice to finally meet you in person." But Marley didn't wag his tail. He didn't lift his head to sniff. Instead, his body tensed like a coiled spring, and a deep, throaty growl rumbled from his chest. Low and trembling, not loud, but unmistakably menacing. Kayla paused on the threshold, her smile faltering for just a beat. Claire laughed nervously, shifting Ellie to her other hip. "Sorry about him. He's protective. Retired police dog. He just takes a little time to warm up." Marley didn't move. He didn't blink. Claire bent down, placed a calming hand on his back, feeling the taut muscles beneath his golden fur. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. But Marley's gaze never left Kayla's face, not even for a second. David came downstairs, offering Kayla a handshake and a quick rundown of Ellie's routine, while Marley slunk into the hallway, positioning himself halfway between the family and their guest, his paws rigid on the hardwood floor. As Kayla settled in, unpacking toys from her bag and cooing sweetly at Ellie, Marley watched. His tail didn't wag. His ears didn't relax. He simply watched. Claire noticed it, but she told herself it was just adjustment. Dogs were sensitive to change, especially dogs like Marley trained to sense things humans couldn't. But as the morning drifted by and Claire and David left for work, Marley remained vigilant, trailing Kayla's every move with silent suspicion. He never barked, never lunged. But that growl, the one from the doorway, echoed in Claire's mind the entire drive. She would forget it for now, buried under meetings and emails and errands. But Marley wouldn't. Because something in him, something deep and instinctual, had already decided that Kayla didn't belong. And no matter how polite her smile or gentle her voice, Marley's eyes, sharp as ever, had seen something else. Something hidden behind that smile. Something no one else had. An uneasy silence. Kayla's first few shifts passed uneventfully, or at least that's how they looked on the surface. Claire and David would come home to soft music playing, dinner halfway prepped on the stove, and little Ellie laughing in her playpen, cheeks rosy and eyes bright. Kayla was always quick with a smile, always standing just a little too straight, too composed, like she had rehearsed the moment in a mirror. She wore calming colors, spoke in even tones, and made sure to compliment Marley each time he appeared in the room. "He's such a good boy," she'd say, offering her hand cautiously, palm down. But Marley never took it. He'd sit several feet away, head tilted, expression unreadable, like he was trying to listen for something only he could hear. At night, Claire would brush off his strange behavior. "He just misses the action," she told David as they climbed into bed. Marley curled at the foot. "You know how sharp he used to be. Maybe he just doesn't know how to turn it off." David nodded, half asleep already. But Marley didn't sleep, not fully. His ears flicked at every creak of the house, every settling groan of the floorboards, every soft sound that seemed out of place. The next morning, Marley stood outside Ellie's nursery before Kayla even arrived. When Claire opened the door to let her in, Marley didn't growl this time. He just stared, long and hard. Kayla laughed nervously, rubbing her arm. He's intense, isn't he? Claire smiled politely but said nothing. Throughout the week, the same pattern repeated. Kayla played the perfect sitter reading storybooks, preparing organic snacks, even folding laundry without being asked. But Marley was never at ease. He didn't rest in the living room anymore. Instead, he hovered just out of reach, pacing the hallway, lying by the door with his head on his paws, his eyes never straying far from wherever Kayla was. If she went to the kitchen, he sat in the doorway. If she took Ellie to the nursery, Marley positioned himself just. Outside, ears pricked, nostrils flaring, like he was trying to catch the faintest scent of a lie. Claire started noticing little things, Kayla locking the bathroom door even when Ellie was asleep, whispering something too low for the baby monitor to catch, jumping slightly when Marley entered a room unannounced. Still, nothing was concrete. Nothing you could point to and say, this is wrong. It was just a feeling. A low hum of tension that never fully went away. Like the house itself was holding its breath. Marley began to whimper at the window after they left for work, pressing his nose against the glass as the car pulled out of the driveway. Claire waved at him each morning, unaware of the storm building just beyond her line of sight. Marley wasn't being nostalgic. He wasn't anxious or confused. He was trying to warn them. But they weren't ready to listen. Not yet. Scratches at the door. It started so subtly that Claire almost didn't notice. One morning, she was picking up toys from the hallway when she saw the door to Ellie's room. Its white paint, clean and smooth, just days before now, bore faint, uneven scratches near the handle, small, erratic marks that hadn't been there before. Claire ran her fingers over them, trying to make sense of the jagged grooves. Maybe Marley had scratched at the door during the night. But he hadn't done that since he was a pup, and never without reason. She dismissed it as coincidence, a fluke, a one-off moment she could forget by the time her coffee brewed. But the next night, Marley's pacing returned. It wasn't frantic, but deliberate. His claws clicked softly against the hardwood as he walked the hallway over and over, pausing only to sniff at Ellie's closed door. At 2:47 a.m., Claire awoke to a deep growl rumbling beside her. Marley stood at the edge of the bed, his body tense, head low, ears forward like a soldier ready for command. He stared at the bedroom door, unmoving, until Claire finally rose and followed his gaze. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, rubbing her arms as a cold draft curled beneath the door. Marley gave a soft whimper and trotted ahead, leading her toward the nursery. The hallway felt colder than usual. Claire's bare feet touched the floor, and a chill shot up her spine. She opened the nursery door slowly, heart thudding louder with each inch it creaked open. Inside, the nightlight cast soft shadows across the room. Ellie lay curled in her crib, breathing evenly, cheeks pink and calm. Everything looked fine, normal. But Marley didn't follow her in. He stood in the doorway, growling low again, eyes scanning the corners like he expected something to leap from the shadows. Claire watched him uneasily, then picked up Ellie for a moment, just to be sure. Her daughter stirred but didn't cry. She was okay. She had to be. The next morning, Claire found one of Ellie's plush animals, her favorite stuffed bunny, resting outside the nursery door. She frowned, remembering putting it back in the crib after tucking Ellie in. Maybe Ellie had tossed it? But the distance didn't make sense. It was a full 5 feet from the crib to the door. Claire tried to let it go, but unease clung to her thoughts like fog. That afternoon, she decided to test something. She pretended to leave the house, stepping outside for 5 minutes, then quietly re-entered through the back. She moved through the house in silence, heart pounding, and paused just before the hallway. What she saw made her stop cold. Marley stood stock still, eyes locked on the nursery door, which was open a crack. Inside, Kayla stood over Ellie's crib. She wasn't touching her, but she wasn't smiling either. Her face was blank, hollow, focused. Claire didn't say anything then. She stepped forward casually, forcing a smile. Kayla jumped slightly, turning too quickly. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in." Claire nodded, but her stomach turned. Something wasn't right, and Marley knew it. He had known it from the start. The bite that shouldn't have happened. It was Friday morning and the house was unusually still, the kind of quiet that felt too heavy, too deliberate. Claire had just stepped out of the shower when she heard Marley's snarl louder, sharper than before. It sliced through the silence like a blade, followed almost immediately by a scream that sent her heart crashing against her ribs. She grabbed a towel, barely wrapped it around herself, and bolted down the stairs. The living room was chaos in a frozen frame. Kayla crouched in the corner, eyes wide with shock, one hand clamped tightly over her forearm where blood bloomed through the fabric like red ink on paper. Marley stood just feet away, head low, teeth exposed, his body perfectly still but radiating intensity like a drawn bowstring. Ellie was behind him, seated on the playmat, her tiny fingers gripping the edge of a soft book, eyes darting between the adults with confusion. "He just snapped," Kayla shouted, her voice high and shaking, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was reaching for the toy bin, and he lunged." Claire stood in stunned silence, trying to process what she was seeing. Marley turned his head slightly toward her, just for a moment, as if to say, "I had to." There was no foam, no wild eyes, no thrashing or frenzy, just Marley, alert, breathing heavily, never once letting Kayla out of his sight. David came running from the garage, saw the blood, the posture, the fear etched across Kayla's face, and immediately reached for the phone. "We have to call animal control," he said, already dialing. Claire hesitated. Something felt wrong not with Marley, but with the picture in front of her. It didn't add up. She'd seen dogs snap. She'd seen fear in their eyes, panic in their posture. This wasn't that. This was different, controlled, deliberate. But the blood on Kayla's sleeve made the decision for them. Within the hour, Marley was gone. The officer who arrived took one look at him, commented on his size, and said it was standard procedure to remove a dog after a bite, no matter the circumstance. Marley didn't fight it. He didn't bark. He walked obediently to the van, pausing only once to glance back at Claire. Her throat closed. Ellie started crying that evening and wouldn't stop. Not for snacks, not for cartoons, not even for Claire's lullabies. She kept pointing at the front door, sobbing, "Mar," over and over again, and voice cracking with heartbreak. Claire rocked her daughter for hours, trying to soothe her, but the house felt colder without him. Like something essential had been ripped away. Kayla stayed late, sitting on the edge of the couch with her bandaged arm, quietly watching as Claire paced with Ellie in her arms. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I don't know what happened." But Claire wasn't looking at her. Her eyes were locked on the security camera nestled in the corner of the ceiling, silent, blinking, and holding the truth Marley hadn't been able to say. The footage. David sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tapping nervously against the wood as Ellie's cries finally softened into hiccuping sobs upstairs. Claire paced nearby, arms wrapped around herself like armor, eyes darting toward the front door every time the wind rattled the windows. Then David stopped tapping. He looked up, his voice low, calm, but carrying weight. "Check the Nest Cam." Claire blinked. "What?" "The camera," he said, already pulling out his phone. "The one in the living room. It's still connected." The thought hadn't occurred to her. They'd installed it months ago, just to keep an eye on Ellie while they were away. Then it had become part of the background, always blinking quietly in the corner, forgotten until now. Claire hesitated as David brought up the app. The feed was there, clear, time-stamped. He scrubbed back to that morning, paused at the moment he and Claire had left for work, then hit play. They both leaned in, breath caught, the glow of the screen painting their faces in pale blue. At first, everything seemed normal. Kayla entered the frame, carrying Ellie on her hip, humming softly. She set the baby down in the play area and crouched beside her, smiling. Then the smile faded. Slowly, methodically. Kayla stood and walked toward the camera's edge, disappearing for a moment. When she returned, she was holding Ellie again, only this time, there was no warmth in her movements. She walked to the crib, placed Ellie inside, and leaned over her for several seconds, just watching. Claire's nails dug into her palm. Then it happened. Kayla's hand hovered over Ellie's face. A strange stillness filled the frame. Then her hand pressed down, firm, unwavering, over Ellie's tiny mouth. The baby squirmed, her arms waving, legs kicking. But Kayla didn't move, didn't flinch. Claire let out a sharp breath, a strangled gasp, her body going cold. Then, like a missile, Marley burst into frame. He collided with Kayla so hard she stumbled backward, her grip broken, her body hitting the edge of the crib before crumpling to the floor. Marley stood over Ellie, snarling with every ounce of fury in his body, his teeth flashing, body rigid, protective. Kayla scrambled back, clutching her arm the exact moment Marley must have bitten her. But it was clear now. He hadn't attacked out of madness. He'd intervened with precision, purpose. David froze the frame. Claire's hand trembled as she reached for the phone, but it slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor. She fell to her knees, her breath gone, a hollow ache building in her chest. He wasn't attacking, she whispered. He was saving her. David sat down slowly beside her, the silence heavy with realization. They had doubted him, called for him to be taken. And all along, Marley had known. He had acted not out of instinct, but out of loyalty, out of love for the child he'd silently vowed to protect. Claire's voice cracked as she spoke again, barely more than a whisper. We have to get him back. The police report, the hours that followed, felt like living in someone else's nightmare, unfolding too fast, too sharp, too surreal. Claire barely remembered making the call. One moment she was clutching the edge of the counter, trembling, as David replayed the footage again to be absolutely sure, and the next, red and blue lights were flooding their driveway, voices crackling over radios, uniforms moving through their home like a slow wave of authority. The lead officer, a seasoned woman with steel gray eyes and a no-nonsense tone, watched the footage without speaking. When it ended, she simply looked at Claire and said, "We need a copy of this, right now." Claire nodded, her voice caught in her throat, and David rushed to export the clip. Statements were taken separately, carefully, methodically. Claire's voice quivered as she recounted everything: the growls, the scratches, the way Marley had acted not like a confused pet, but like a sentinel. David, usually composed, kept fidgeting, his knuckles white against the pen as he signed his written account. Your dog was trained? The officer asked. Police K-9, retired 3 years ago, David replied. Seizure detection and child rescue support. The officer nodded once, slowly, then turned to another deputy. Get in touch with animal control. That dog doesn't belong in a cage. Marley was cleared by the department within the hour. The officer's report would state that his actions prevented what could have been a fatal event, and that his behavior was consistent with professional, protective conduct, not aggression. But by then, Marley was already gone. Claire demanded they bring him back immediately, but protocol slowed everything. In the whirlwind, no one had noticed something even more disturbing: Kayla had disappeared. One officer attempted to contact her regarding charges, only to find that the number on file went straight to a disconnected tone. Another tried the address listed on her application, which turned out to be a vacant lot next to a burned-out warehouse on the other side of town. It didn't make sense. She had references, a polished resume, even a glowing online profile with photos of children she supposedly cared for. But when the department reached out to her last listed employer, the person on the other end hesitated. That name doesn't sound familiar, they said. We had someone briefly, but we never finished vetting her. She left before the second week. The record was marked as unverified. Claire stood at the center of her kitchen, arms wrapped around her waist, trying to stay upright as the pieces began falling apart around her. It wasn't just a lie, it was a fabrication, an entire persona built on shadows and silence. How did she even get in our home? Claire whispered. No one had an answer. But one thing was clear now. Marley had known. Not from paperwork, not from background checks, but from something deeper, something primal. He had looked into her eyes and seen what no human could. And he had acted not because he was told, but because he understood the danger before anyone else did, the trail she left behind. The days that followed were thick with tension, the kind that settled into your bones and refused to let go. Claire sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in over an hour, while David spoke in hushed tones to a detective on speakerphone. Marley hadn't come home yet, held for a final behavioral assessment, they said, but cleared and waiting. Claire wanted to scream every time the word waiting came up. But now the focus had shifted. It was no longer just about what had happened. It was about who had been in their home and why. Detective Ramirez's voice crackled through the line. We ran her photo through facial recognition and got a partial match 3 aliases used in 2 states, all tied to short-term nanny or caregiving positions. No criminal convictions, but the records are littered with red flags. Complaints that disappeared, employers who wouldn't talk, and in one case, a non-disclosure signed after a settlement that raised more questions than answers. Claire gripped the mug tighter, her knuckles pale. "What kind of complaints?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ramirez paused. Emotional manipulation. Children showing signs of fear. One report of unexplained bruising that never led to charges. But no one had footage like you do. No dog that intervened. Marley's name hung in the air like a banner of justice. Claire felt a pulse of pride swell in her chest before the fear crept back in. "But why Ellie?" she asked. "Why our daughter?" That was the question no one could answer. Theories floated: random selection, a job taken because of proximity, or worse, a targeted choice based on some invisible calculation. But Claire's gut said it wasn't random. Something about the way Kayla had looked at Ellie in that video, cold, possessive, almost ritualistic, felt deliberate. David tapped at his tablet, pulling up Kayla's online sitter profile. It had vanished. Scrubbed clean overnight. No posts, no pictures, no contact information. She'd gone underground. But Ramirez assured them the photo from the security footage had already been distributed. Her face was now in national databases, flagged for questioning in 3 open investigations. "She's running," Ramirez said. "But she won't run forever." Still, it brought little comfort to Claire, who couldn't stop replaying every moment she had let that woman hold her child. She walked the halls of their home at night, peeking into Ellie's room just to hear her breathe. And always, always, she felt the absence of Marley, his silent presence, his watchful gaze. Ellie, too, had changed. She was quieter, clinging more, often waking from naps and sudden screams that could only be soothed with her face buried in the old shirt Marley used to sleep on. Claire didn't tell the detective about those nights when Ellie would whisper, "Bad lady gone?" into the dark. She didn't have to. The footage said it all. And the question that haunted them now wasn't just where Kayla had gone, but what she'd done before, and who might still be out there, waiting for the next unlocked door, a child's whisper. The days moved forward, but something inside the house that still felt broken, like the air itself had been stained by the memory of what had happened. Ellie no longer laughed the way she used to. Her giggles, once bright and bubbling, were now quieter, hesitant, as if joy had become something she needed permission to feel. Claire noticed the change with the kind of ache that lived deep in a mother's chest, something ancient and unshakable. Each night, she read the same bedtime story, held her daughter a little longer, and listened for whispers in the dark. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Claire sat cross-legged on the floor of Ellie's room, gently brushing her daughter's soft curls as sunlight streamed through the window. The scent of lavender lingered from the diffuser, calm and sweet. But Claire's mind was far from calm. She looked into the mirror across from them. Watching Ellie's reflection, so small and still, she took a breath and asked the question that had been sitting like a stone on her heart. "Ellie," she said softly, "did Kayla ever scare you?" There was a pause, long enough to make Claire wonder if she'd heard her at all. Then Ellie nodded slowly, solemnly. Claire felt the brush still in her hand. Her pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. "What did she do, sweetheart?" Ellie's eyes didn't leave the mirror. Her little voice came out barely above a whisper, but every syllable sliced through the room like glass. She said she'd take me away and not tell you. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The words hung there, impossible and undeniable. She turned her daughter gently to face her, kneeling so they were eye to eye. When did she say that? Ellie blinked. When you were gone. She told me not to tell. She said you'd forget me. The tears came fast, hot and unstoppable. Claire wrapped her arms around Ellie, holding her as tightly as she dared, whispering over and over, I'd never forget you. You're my whole world. Ellie clung to her, face buried in her neck, and Claire could feel the tiny trembles of her body, the way children shake when they're trying not to cry but can't stop. That night, after Ellie finally fell asleep, Claire sat in the hallway outside her door, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the spot where Marley used to lie silent, steady, guarding them all. He'd known. Not just in a way that humans understand, but deeper. Marley had sensed the danger, had seen what they couldn't see, had acted with a loyalty that went beyond training. He had carried Ellie's fear. Before she even had the words to describe it, he had heard her unspoken terror and stood between it and her tiny heart. Claire closed her eyes, the silence ringing in her ears. They had almost lost everything, not just Ellie's safety, but her sense of trust, her innocence. Marley had caught it just in time. And now she knew with unwavering certainty his absence wasn't just felt. It was a hole in their family's soul, Marley's return. The morning Marley came home, the sky seemed brighter, the air felt softer and fuller. The first time in days, Claire's chest didn't ache with every breath. A squad car pulled into the driveway slowly, its lights off, but its presence bold and unmistakable. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some stepping out to watch, drawn by the quiet gravity of the moment. Claire stood at the doorway, holding Ellie's tiny hand, her fingers trembling not from fear this time, but from the unbearable swell of hope. The officer stepped out first, his uniform crisp, eyes warm, and then from the back seat, Marley emerged. No leash, no muzzle, just pride. His coat gleamed in the morning sun, and though he moved with the same calm discipline he always had, his eyes immediately locked on Claire and Ellie. And in that moment, something inside Claire broke free. Marley, Ellie cried, her voice a pure, piercing note of joy as she tore away from Claire's grasp and sprinted across the yard. Marley's ears perked, tail wagging furiously, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he ran not with caution, but with the wild, beautiful abandon of a dog going home. He met Ellie halfway, lowering his body so she could wrap her arms around his thick neck, and he licked her cheek with a softness that brought tears rushing to Claire's eyes. The officers stood nearby, giving them space, one holding a small black box with a gold-plated K9 badge inside a symbol of reinstatement, of honor, of everything Marley had done without command or expectation. We'd be proud to call him active again, one officer said. But I think he already has a post right here. Claire nodded, her voice caught in her throat. She bent down beside Marley as he sat back on his haunches. Ellie nestled against him like he was made of safety itself. Claire ran her hand over his head, her fingers sinking into the soft fur just above his eyes. He leaned into her touch. You saved her, boy, she whispered, voice cracking. You saved all of us. Marley didn't bark, didn't move, but his gaze swept the porch, the sidewalk, the surrounding trees, always scanning, always protecting. His instincts never rested, even now. That night, they moved his bed next to Ellie's crib, just like it had been before. Only this time it wasn't just about routine, it was about something sacred. Ellie fell asleep curled up with one hand on his paw, her breathing steady, her dreams finally quiet. Claire watched from the doorway, David's arm wrapped around her shoulders, both of them silent as they looked at the two most important beings in their world. Marley didn't stir when they turned off the lights, but his eyes stayed open, watching, waiting. Guardian once again in place, and this time, they'd never question him again. The Guardian sleeps. Marley's bed sat nestled beside Ellie's crib now, not just out of comfort, but out of silent duty. Every night as the house quieted and the last whispers of bedtime songs faded into darkness, Marley took his place, curling gently into the familiar shape of a protector. His body rested, but his eyes stayed open until Ellie's had closed, scanning the room like a watchtower in the deep of night. The soft glow of the baby monitor painted faint outlines across the nursery walls, and still Marley remained unmoving, unblinking, breathing in the rhythms of a home he had once nearly lost. The security system stayed active. The doors were triple checked. But everyone knew the truth now. No technology could match the presence of the sentinel who lay beside their daughter. Claire would pause at the door sometimes, just for a moment before turning in herself. And she'd watch them both. Marley still and silent, Ellie sprawled out with one tiny hand often resting gently on his back. It wasn't just routine now, it was ritual. A sacred pact between girl and guardian forged through a storm they had survived together. Sometimes, in the still hours just before dawn, Claire would find Marley staring at the door. Not with worry, not with fear, but with the calm precision of a creature who understood that evil doesn't always wear a face, and protection isn't just a moment, it's a lifetime. He didn't bark unless necessary. He didn't react without cause. But the family had learned to read the signs now, the twitch of his ears, the narrowing of his eyes, the sudden stiffness in his posture. They trusted him in a way deeper than words, because he had proven what no background check ever could. Ellie had begun speaking more, her voice returning like a spring bloom, and every time she saw Marley, her smile lit up the room. Marmar, my hero, she'd whisper proudly, pulling picture books onto the rug beside him, reading half-real words while he listened patiently. He became her shadow again, only now with a different kind of bond, one not just of loyalty, but of salvation. David mounted a framed copy of Marley's reinstated K9 badge in the hallway, just beside the family photo that had once been taken without him. Not anymore. Marley was part of the frame now, the story, the legacy. Claire would run her hand across it each night, not out of formality, but gratitude. Because whatever darkness had slipped into their lives, Marley had met it head-on and driven it out. And now, as the house settled and night deepened, Marley's head would finally rest on his paws, his eyes heavy, his duty done for the day. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting soft silver shadows across the nursery, and Ellie breathed deeply, dreamless and safe. Outside, the wind whispered against the trees, but inside there was only peace. The guardian slept, but even in sleep, he never truly let go.